Yes? How's that going? Why are we here? You know, from time to time, it's good for us to step back from who we are and where we are and what we're doing and take another look at who we are and where we are and what we're doing, because if we don't do that, we tend to get caught up in our own little worlds. And that's a very dangerous place to be. You know, as you go through an experience of education, one of the teacher's role is to draw you out of your own little world. You know, and there's going to be people that you're going to come up against in your life who get caught up in their own little world. You know, and the reality is that as human beings, we have this danger, this tendency to get caught up in our own little worlds, and it's a really dangerous place to be. And the reason it's dangerous is because the way we see the world determines where we live our lives. Okay, not the way the world is. Reality has nothing to do with it. But the way we see the world, the way we perceive the world determines where we live our lives. And so every single person here tonight has a worldview. You may have never sat down and said, oh, this is my worldview, I'm going to write it out. But you've got a worldview, you operate out of that worldview. What's your worldview? There are 7 billion people on the planet today. If we reduce the world's population to 100 people, proportionally, 57 of those 100 people would come from Asia, 21 from Europe, 14 from North and South America, and 8 from Africa. 51 would be women, 49 would be men, 31 of those 100 people wouldn't be able to read and write. How do you see the world? 6 of those 100 people would own or control 50% of the world's wealth. 5 of those 6 people would be US citizens. 3 of those 5 people live on the same street on the North Shore of Long Island. How do you see the world? How do they see the world? One of those 100 people would have just been born. One of those 100 people would be just about to die, and only one of those 100 people would have been to college. How do you see the world? Because tons of people walking around thinking, well, everyone goes to college, right? Wrong. 1 in 100 people on planet Earth have a college experience. 1/3 of the world's population is dying from lack of bread. Ponder that. Okay, it's 2013, conquered outer space, invented the internet, put together whatever list of human accomplishment you want to put together, and then put that up against the idea that there are 2 billion people on this planet tonight hungry just for bread on our watch. How do you see the world? 1/3 of the world's population dying from lack of bread, 1/3 of the world's population dying from lack of justice, and 1/3 of the world's population dying from overeating. How was dinner? How do you see the world? Because the way we see the world determines where we live our lives. Every Sunday you go to church, Father gets up and reads the gospel. Sometimes the deacon, I guess you have deacons. You got deacons? Sometimes the deacons, sometimes you have the deacons. Sometimes then they beat me up in the parking lot. But seriously, every time priest reads the gospel on Sunday, what are we challenged? To reassess our worldview. To reassess our worldview. And through this experience of college, what has been and what is going to be challenged is your worldview. You'll be challenged to develop one. And so let's put some context to it. One question I want you to obsess about this academically here is the question that all the great minds of every age have obsessed themselves with. And that question is, how is the best way to live? How is the best way to live? You've got a whole culture out there telling you 100 different ways are the best way to live. Your parents are going to say this is the best way to live. Your college professor is going to say this is the best way to live. But ultimately, you have to answer the question for yourself. How's the best way to live? Where's our starting point? Our starting point is another question, I suppose. The question is, what do you want? I gave you a notepad and I said, go away and make a big long list of everything you want. You came back 2 hours later with a big long list of everything you want. I've got a couple of couches up here, one for Dr. Phil and one for Oprah and one for you. And we started the big long list of everything you want. We would discover you want the things you want because you will believe they will make you happy. That's why you want what you want. You want what you want because you believe it will make you happy. Your overwhelming desire is a desire for happiness. Your overwhelming desire. It's true for every single one of us. It's true for us from a very young age. Why? Because God has created us with this primary desire for happiness. I got 3 little kids. I got Walter, he's 3. I got Isabel, she's 2. I got Harry, he's like 2 months. You know, and I remember about a year ago, Walter was about 2. And I'm sitting in the kitchen one night. We've got this monitor in his room. We can see him, we can hear him. We're watching. Sitting in the kitchen one night, about a year ago, 18 months ago. He wasn't even 2 at the time. My wife's put him to bed, reads him a book, says his prayers with him, tucks him in his crib. Just about to get to the door, just about to open the door. I'm sitting in the kitchen, I'm watching this. He said, "Mummy, I have something to tell you." So my wife turns around. He said, "What is it?" He said, "Mummy, I'm a very happy boy." It's like, dude, you don't even know what happiness is, you know? You're like, nothing to do. But then for like 2 weeks, I'd ask him every day, "How are you, Walter?" "I'm a very happy boy, Daddy." And then one night, I come home. I come into the kitchen, he's in his high chair, Walter's in his high chair, Isabel's in her high chair, they're having dinner. I say to Walter, "How's my very happy boy today?" He says, "No, Daddy." I said to my wife, "What did you do to my son?" No, she drop kicked me. I said to my wife, "What happened?" In the county house, nap time is from 1:30 to 4:30 every day of the week, every day of the year. Okay? Well, this day he decides he doesn't want to take a nap. Okay? He decides he wants to do his stand-up act for his stuffed animals and build caves with his blankets so he doesn't take his nap. So by 6:30, he's sad boy. It's the only way he can articulate it, right? Guston said grace built on nature, right? Grace built on nature. His ability to have happiness when he hasn't had his nap massively diminishes. There's a lot of natural things in your universe that when you don't have them, your ability for happiness naturally diminishes. But you've got this desire for happiness. And I really want you to start paying attention to it. Because it's a primary desire. God's given you this desire, He's given it to you for a reason. Because He created you for happiness. The problem is we get confused about what will really make us happy. And our culture, particularly in the present age, trying to convince us that happiness and pleasure are the same thing. And they're not. So what is the difference between happiness and pleasure? Well, pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity producing it. Pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity producing it. You got that? You with me? No, I'm suspicious of some of you people. Just sort of looking up here. I don't know what you're thinking. I mean, I got a rough idea what you're thinking. Certainly I know what the women are thinking. No, seriously, I can read women's minds. You don't believe that's true? Oh, let's try. The women are thinking, great accent. It doesn't matter what he says, as long as he just keeps talking. You can read me the phone book. A little bit harder to read the guy's mind, you know? Have you ever tried to read a guy's mind? It's like dangerous. It's like a contact sport or something, right? I don't know what the guys are thinking. The guys are thinking, man, what I could get done with an accent like that. Come on now, focus in, focus in, focus in. Repeat after me. Pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity producing it.
Pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity producing it.
I give an example. When we eat, we feel pleasure. Yes or yes?
Yes.
We stop eating, the pleasure stops. That's why we don't stop eating. Seriously, right? We're not hungry. We're not hungry. 75% of the time when we're eating, we're not actually hungry. Our little stomach says, "Excuse me, I'm full down here." We say, "You shut up." This thing. Just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. Because we like the pleasure of eating, right? And pleasure cannot be sustained on the activity producing it. You want the pleasure You've got to continue the activity. That's how it works. But happiness is different. I'll give you another example. You come home from a hard day at school one day next week. Like 2 contact hours or something. That was a joke. It's your day to work out, you know. Come home from a hard day at school next week and it's your day to work out. Whatever day that is, right? But it's that day of the year. You think, I don't really feel like working out, which is a shocking revelation. So you've got to make a choice. You've got to decide, you're going to work out, or you're going to plant yourself in your lazy boy recliner chair in front of a 127-inch idiot box with a 6-pack of beer and a 300-ounce bag of Doritos. I think, gee, that's a tough choice. I think, I wonder which one will help me become the best version of myself. The beer or the Doritos? So here's the thing, you don't feel like working out. You don't feel like working out, but you force yourself to work out. Funny thing about that, whenever you get done working out, even if you have to force yourself to work out, whenever you get done working out, you're always glad you worked out. That's happiness. Happiness can be sustained beyond the activity producing it. That's what God created you for. Not fleeting moments of pleasure, but for lasting happiness in a changing world. And truth is, that's what you're looking for. Lasting happiness in a changing world. The question is, where are you going to get it from? How is the best way to live? What's going to be your philosophy of life? Culture says individualism, minimalism, hedonism. Individualist says, what's in it for me? What can I get out of it? Okay? Hedonist says, if it feels good, I'll do it. Minimalist says, what's the least I can do and still get by? What's going to be your philosophy of life? How is the best way to live? And how rigorously are you going to look at the question? Because I can tell you, most people stumble through 4 years of college and never even get the question a serious one. That's the tragedy of modern education. Most people stumble through 4 years of college education, never even get at the big questions, never even get at the questions that are at the heart of the educational experience. How is the best way to live? I want you to obsess about it this year. And not just this year, beyond. So that you can continue to refine the philosophy of life that you draw yourself from. In order to get at that, first thing you got to do is you got to detach yourself from the crazy culture from time to time. You got to detach yourself from the crazy culture from time to time. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and I think that as a teenager, I was completely absorbed in the culture. But probably when I was about 15, I started to realize, something's not working here. I'm not really happy. I didn't have any particular drama. I just started to sense that something wasn't right, something was missing about me. And I had a very interesting experience one Sunday afternoon. I was at a barbecue with some of my mates, and I looked across. Yeah, that's friends. Hanging out your breath out there. I can see that. Anyway, I met this barbecue this Sunday afternoon with my friends. I looked across the barbecue as this friend of mine was there, and he was older than us. You know, he must have been, I guess at the time, he must have been at least 15 years older than me. And come to think of it, he's probably still 15 years older than me. He must be 30, he was like ancient, you know? I didn't really want to be seen with the old people. He was like a friend of my family, so I was like avoiding him for the whole afternoon. But about halfway through the afternoon, he came up to me and he said, "How are you, Daddy?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "How's school?" I said, "School's fine." See, when I was a teenager, the answer to every question was fine. How was your day? Fine. What'd you like for dinner? Fine. When I was a teenager, the answer to every question was fine. Now, I've noticed today teenagers aren't really that articulate. Tell me I'm not right. How are you? How's your day? But this guy was a doctor. Great doctors, great teachers, great priests know how to ask questions. And he just kept asking me these questions for about 10 minutes, and then he just paused, he just looked me in the eye, he said, Matthew, you're not happy, are you? I was ashamed to admit it. So we get like that, don't we? We know something's going on, someone calls us on it, but we're ashamed to admit it. I said, I'm fine. I said, no, you're not. He said, tell me really what's going on inside. I said, I just got this sense that something's wrong. He said, something's not wrong. He said, something's missing. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you need to spend some time at church. I said, no, I go to church on Sunday. He said, that's not what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? He said, I just want you to stop by church on the way to school each morning just for 10 minutes. Just sit there in the quiet. I'm thinking to myself, what sort of religious freak do I have on my hands here? I didn't tell him I thought he was a religious freak. I just sort of nodded and smiled. You know how we do that sometimes? Yeah, I know some of you have been doing it for about 20 minutes. So I just smiled and nodded and decided to completely ignore him. About 6 weeks later, I'm on my way to school one morning, and I got this restlessness. It's not going away, it's getting worse. This sense that something is wrong, this sense that something is missing, and I'm walking past church. I had to walk past church every day to go to school. I thought to myself this morning, I thought, what? I got nothing to lose. So I wandered into back at church. I said, way up back. You know? And just sort of planned my day. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's sort of amazing, you know, just by planning my day, I felt so peaceful. I think it's my first time in my adult life where I actually genuinely felt peaceful. And I liked it. So I came back to the next day, sat at the back playing my day. I did this about every day for about 3 weeks. And then one day it occurred to me, some great intellectual discovery, that planning your day isn't really prayer. You know? So I decided to pray. I said, listen up, God. The servant is speaking. I want this, 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 I want this. Get busy with that, God. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm so proud of myself now. I'm really praying, you know? Talking to God and whatnot. But I did this every day for about 3 weeks. You know, I come in, I plan my day, I give God his instructions for the day, and then I go to school, you know. And then I remember this one particular day, I had this situation I was sort of struggling with, and I remember coming to church, and I remember just looking up toward the tabernacle and saying, all right, God, I got a problem here. This is the situation. What do you think I should do? That question changed my life. I call that the big question. When we have the courage or the desperation to come before God and say, all right, God, what do you think I should do? When we have the courage to sit down with the divine architect and ask him to show us his plan. I kept coming back and I kept praying 10 minutes a day. And it changed my life. Why? Because our lives change when our habits change, right? You tell me what new habits you're going to acquire this year, I can tell you exactly how your life is going to change this year. You tell me what new habits you're going to acquire in the next decade, I can tell you the person you will be 10 years from now. Because our lives change when our habits change, and we become our habits. Why? Because habits determine character, and character determines destiny. But whatever it is you want to accomplish in this life, whatever it is you want to experience in this life, you better reverse engineer it through your habits. Because positive or negative, your habits are going to play a massive role in your life. And if I convince you of nothing else here tonight, get yourself into the classroom of silence. You will learn more in an hour of silence than you can in a year from books. Why? Because it's in silence that we really discover who we are. It's in the silence that we really discover our God. And it's the combination of that knowledge of who we are and knowledge of who God is, that will spark something incredible in your life. Otherwise, 10 years from now, more likely than not, you'll be another cog in the global economic wheel, leading what Thoreau described as a life of quiet desperation, wondering how the heck it ever happened to you. But that's how it happens. People don't plan for it to happen. People don't say, gee, when I grow up, I'd really like to lead a life of quiet desperation. It's not part of their great master plan. How does it happen? They don't take time to work out who they are. They don't take time to work out what they're really here for. They don't take time to think about the big questions. So take that time. Take that time. I want to challenge you, because it's a game changer. It's a game changer. You want your life to be different a year from now? You need 2 game changers. Game changer number 1, get yourself into the classroom of silence each day for a few minutes, away from the crazy, noisy, busy world. Because you can't work out who you really are and what you're really here for out of the noise. Out of the noise. Game changer number 1. You want another game changer? Should we go home now? Game changer number 2. We live in a culture now that is becoming particularly relativistic. Okay, relativism is ruling our culture, which is essentially the idea that there is no absolute truth. The idea that what's true for you isn't necessarily true for me, which is absurdity beyond absurd. And of course, the relativists will say, well, you can't do that as legislation because you can't force your legislation on other people. You can't legislate around your values because that would be forcing your values on other people. Well, all legislation forces somebody's values on someone. That's how it works. The question is, how closely aligned is the legislation to the truth? How closely aligned is our lives to the truth? Once you become hungry for truth, I want you to encourage you to look for the truth everywhere you go. I particularly want to encourage you to explore one person in particular. You got Bible studies here on campus, yeah? You got that? If you're with me, say uh-huh. That's good. Yeah, 2,000 years ago, had this guy walking out of Jesus, and you heard about him, did you? If you heard about him, say uh-huh. Yeah, that's good too. Our modern culture tried to reduce Jesus to sort of like a figment of Christian imagination, okay? But he most certainly is not. How do we know that? Well, we know that because Christian writers wrote about him, but that can be such a massive conspiracy. You know, we know it because Jewish historians wrote about Jesus. We know it because secular historians wrote about Jesus. We know that Jesus is not a figment of Christian imagination. We know that this man actually lived and walked the earth 2,000 years ago. But I think our knowledge of who he really is really disappearing at a rapid rate in our culture. And so while you're here in college, I want you to take some time to work out who Jesus is, because I think when you do, you'll discover that he is the greatest teacher of all time, and that he has something to say about the big questions. The problem is, you probably already think you know Jesus. I thought that a while ago. I spent the last 4 years, I've been developing a confirmation program, okay? And so, like, you got 1 million Catholic kids get confirmed in this country every year. Half of them want to shoot themselves before they get done with the confirmation preparation because it's that bad, you know? So, my staff and I decided to do something about that, you know? And I started working on this confirmation thing. It's like, whoa, how are you gonna teach such big concepts to such little minds, you know, 12, 14-year-olds, whatever? But the thing that really got to me is, you know, Father said, I've been doing this for 20 years. The thing that really got to me, I worked on this thing for 4 years, I come to the conclusion, I don't know Jesus anywhere near as well as I should. You know, not even close. You sit down, take a legal pad sometime the next week, sit down, write down everything you know about Jesus. You're amazed how quickly you run out of things to write. Okay? This is the guy that has shaped civilization for the last 2,000 years. This is the guy all of human history hinges on. And the real problem is that our culture wants to reduce it to just some sort of like plaster cast, sugar-coated, nice guy. You know? It's like Jesus walking down the road one day with his disciples. He said, "Who do people say that I am?" You know, it's like a trick question. The disciples probably thought, "Gee, is that a trick question?" Because they were usually the ones asking the questions, you know. They say, "Well, some say John the Baptist come back from the dead, and some say Elijah, and some say one of the great prophets." Then he said, "Well, who do you say that I am?" And you can tell it was a bit of an awkward moment. The disciples sort of looking at each other. Then Peter says, "You know, you're the Christ." If Jesus showed up here tonight, okay, he said, "Matthew, can I talk to these people for a few minutes?" I say, "All right, Jesus, just a few." But seriously, if Jesus showed up here tonight, modern day America, 2013, said, "Listen guys, two questions. Number one, who do people say that I am?" We'd have to tell him, right? We have to say, "Listen, Jesus, most people think you're a nice guy." Nice guy, seriously. And not just the nice guy, but a nice guy. Like there's lots of nice guys, Jesus, and you're one of the nice guys. Congratulations, Jesus, you're one of the nice guys. You know, I think if Jesus asked you who you thought he was, you said, "Well, you're a nice guy," Jesus probably slapped you. Okay, he probably wouldn't because he's non-violent, but he definitely would go temple. Yeah, but if Jesus showed up here, we'd have to tell him, "Yeah, most people think you're a nice guy. Well, what about the other world religions? Well, they think you're a great teacher, a great prophet." You know, which sounds nice, doesn't it? It's accommodating, tolerant. It's the great virtue of our age, isn't it? Tolerance. Don't get me started on that. Seriously, let's just talk about it for a minute. Here's the thing, only one thing I want to say about tolerance, which is the supreme virtue of secularism. Okay? Tolerance is the supreme virtue of secularism. Only thing I want to say about it. You don't have to tolerate good things, do you? Think about it. You don't have to tolerate good things. You don't say, "That was a fabulous meal. I tolerated it." You don't say, "What a great vacation. I'll tolerate it." You don't have to tolerate good stuff. That's all I'll say. You know? And all the other world religions, they say Jesus is a great teacher, a great prophet. The only problem with that, Jesus didn't claim to be a great teacher, a great prophet. Who did Jesus claim to be? He claimed to be the Son of God. If he isn't, he's the biggest liar in the history of the world. Okay? If Jesus isn't actually who he claimed to be, he perpetrated the biggest fraud in the history of the world. So you can't say, "Oh yeah, Jesus, very confused about that Messiah business, but I'll tell you what, great teacher." These things are incongruent, right? You can't say, "Oh, Jesus, very mixed up on the Messiah business, but as a consolation prize, we're going to make him a great prophet." These things are incongruent, they don't go together. We've got to start thinking about this. Start thinking about this guy because it's important. You know, and you scratch into it a little bit. What do you discover? You get into it a little bit, you discover Jesus is actually who he claimed to be. Why is that important? Because words have value based on who speaks them. I say it again, words have value based on who speaks them. Once you realize Jesus is actually who he claims to be, his words take on more value. Those words have value based on who speaks them. Someone who is of no character and a known liar says something you completely disregard. Why? Words have value based on who speaks them. Somebody who has enormous character and massive integrity says something to you that you completely disagree with. You will consider it. Why? Words have value based on who speaks them. Once you discover who Jesus is, you discover that the Gospels are not just another self-help book. You discover that they're not inspiring, they are inspired. Well, they're inspiring too, but they're not just inspiring, they are inspired. I want to challenge you this year. You've got a lot of things to read. I want to challenge you to get in the Gospels. Work out who Jesus is. There's nothing else you learn here that's going to make sense until you work out that. Everything makes sense in relation to that. It is the turning point in history. Get into it. Work out who it is. Work out who he is. Work out what it means to you. So you can answer the second question you asked the disciples, which is, who do you say that I am? That's the Jesus question. Sooner or later, everyone has to answer the Jesus question. You're not answering the question, answer the question. So get ready to answer the question, work out the answer to the question. Because once you really get into it, what you discover is, Jesus was radical. Jesus was radical, not some plaster cast, candy-coated Jesus that the world wants to turn out today. Jesus was a radical. There's 1,000 examples of how radical Jesus is. And his teachings are radical. His teachings were radical 2,000 years ago, and they're radical 2,000 years later. And truth is, they want to have a radical impact on their lives. Many examples of that. You know, let's have a look at one. It's going to be September 11th tomorrow, yes? The 10th today? Tonight? Time's getting away from me. Yeah, it is the night. It's a couple of days from September 11th. Jesus said, Matthew's Gospel, love your enemies. Not only love your enemies, pray for your enemies. It was a radical teaching 2,000 years ago. Yes or yes? Anyone know what the teaching was before that? That's right, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Jesus comes along and says, "Oh, no more of that revenge stuff. We're going over here now. Come on, human race. We're going over here. We're taking a right turn morally, ethically, spiritually. No more vengeance, no more revenge, no more eye for eye, tooth for tooth. We're going over here. What's over here? Love your enemy, pray for your enemy." Radical teaching 2,000 years ago, radical teaching 2,000 years later. I travel a lot, you know. I think one of the beautiful things about Catholicism, we pray for everybody, you know. You go to Mass on Sunday, you take about the Mass, you look at all the people we pray for throughout the Mass, all the groups of people, we pray for the whole world. You think about the idea, Mass is being prayed in 1,000 places, more than that, 10,000 places around the world right now. Catholic Church is praying for the whole world right now, it's a beautiful thing. Then we've got the prayers of the faithful, right? We like localize our prayers. Pray for the sick, pray for the almost sick, pray for the dead, pray for the almost dead, pray for the hungry, the lonely, the poor, the depressed, the leaders, the followers, the addicted, everyone. Only in a decade after September 11th, I never heard a prayer in any of our churches for Osama bin Laden. That, my friends, is the gospel. If your priest got up next Sunday and said, "We're going to have a Mass today for the repose of the soul of Osama bin Laden," what kind of reaction do you think you might get, right? People would be walking out, right? Be letters to the bishop, letters to the editor, media would be there before Mass finished. But that's the gospel. The gospel is not pray for some imaginary enemy that you might have somewhere in an imaginary future that says something bad about you on Facebook. That's not the gospel. But here's the problem. Most of us, we think we know Jesus. And most of us, we think we know the message. And the truth is, we have not even begun to scratch the surface. Not even begun to scratch the surface. I want you to start thinking about your life. Culture wants you to live a shallow existence. Culture wants you to live a shallow existence. You think about what drives a culture. What drives a culture? Let's ask the question. Consumption drives a culture. Like, when was the last time you saw anyone on TV just because they had something really good to say? It never happens, right? They're only on TV because they got something to sell. Okay, when was the last time the host of any show says, "We got this guy on tonight, he's got nothing, absolutely nothing to sell you. We're just having him on because he has enormous wisdom. And we want to share that wisdom with you as an audience." Never happens, right? Why? What's driving our culture? Consumption. What's our culture's vision for you? Our culture wants you just to go along and become a good, little, obedient consumer. And not ask too many questions, and not think too much about life. That's the culture's vision for you. Does that sound like something that's attractive to you? Go along, not ask too many questions, don't think too much about life, be a good, little, obedient consumer. On the other hand, if you don't want the culture's vision, God has another vision for you. God's vision, He wants you to become the best version of yourself. He doesn't want you to become a second-rate version of your parents, of your siblings, of your friends, of your professors. He wants you to become the best version of yourself. He has created you with something in mind. Work out what He had in mind. Work out what He has in mind. Because happiness is right there. And the truth is, every single day, you decide 1,000 times between the best version of yourself and some second-rate version of yourself. Think about it. What makes a good friend? next 10 years of your life, you are going to spend a ridiculously inordinate amount of time pursuing relationship. So let's take 30 seconds and think about it. What makes a good friend? A good friend is someone who helps you become the best version of yourself. You find a friend like that, you better hang on to them. I can tell you, they're hard to find. They're hard to find. You dating someone at the moment? It's that moment of honesty. Is that person helping you become the best version of yourself? And if not, what the heck are you doing? Don't send me an email next week and say, I broke up with my boyfriend because of you. It wasn't me, it was just the truth. But seriously, what makes a good friend? A good friend is someone who helps you become the best version of yourself. What makes good food? Food that helps you become the best version of yourself. Why do we send our kids to school? To torture them. No, the word education comes from the Latin verb educare, which means to draw out. What does it mean? To draw out. Think about the best teacher you ever had. Think about the best teacher you ever had. Guaranteed that person drew out the best version of you. Guaranteed. That person drew out the best version of you. Think about the best coaches you ever had, the best mentors. You had jobs, part-time jobs, the best boss you ever had. What do you discover? Those people drew out the best version of you. That's why we send our kids to school. That's the hope that parents have. That the teachers, the coaches, the mentors, the leaders in their life will draw out the best version of us. What's the meaning, the purpose of work? Making money? No. Another confusion about modern secular culture. Making money is secondary outcome of work. I can prove it to you. Prove it to you. Let's say we live on the same street. You're my neighbor. I'm your neighbor. We got this other neighbor. He sits next door, sits on his back porch each day, drinking beer, doing shots, shooting squirrels. There's a school down the road, a little primary, elementary school down the road, and they need some trees planted. And I go to the squirrel shooter, and I say to him, listen, there's a school down the road. There's a school down the road, and they need some trees planted. Can you help? He says, maybe. I said, what do you mean, maybe? You either can or you can't. He says, well, what do I get? I said, all right, see how it is. I will pay you $10,000 an hour to come down and help plant some trees on Saturday. He says, all right, I'll come for a couple hours, but not too early. I like to sleep in on Saturdays. So he comes down around 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, helps plant trees for 2 hours, but doesn't really do a good job. He's lazy. He doesn't pay attention to the details of his work. Doesn't do a good job. But he gets his $10,000 an hour. He won't be fulfilled. He will not be fulfilled. On the other hand, I say to you, my good non-squirrel shooting neighbor, school down the road, they need someone to help them plant the trees. You say, yeah, no problem, I come down on Saturday. You come down, you do a good job, you work hard, you pay attention to the details of the work, you get paid nothing. You will have more fulfillment than the person getting paid $10,000 an hour. Think about that when you choose your career. Think about that when you decide what job to take and why to take it. Money, secondary outcome of work. Primary value of work, primary purpose of work. When we work hard, we develop character, we develop virtue, we become a better version of ourselves. What's the meaning of the purpose of marriage? Helping each other become the best version of ourselves, and then raising kids and encouraging them to become the best version of themselves. Everything makes sense in relation to God's dream for us. God's dream for you, He wants you to become the best version of yourself. If your life is not making sense, you've lost the dream, guaranteed. Want your life to make sense again? Get the dream back. Place it at the center of your life. It's hard, right? It's hard. Just tomorrow, just try not to do anything that doesn't help you become the best version of yourself. You might want to leave campus for that exercise. You know? But seriously, just try for one day not to do anything that doesn't help you become the best version of yourself. You discover how it's difficult. It's difficult. But it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. Because that's when we're most fully alive. You are most fully alive when you're becoming the person God created you to be. You're most fully alive when you're becoming a better version of yourself. But don't take my word for it. I want you to try it. I want you to experiment with this stuff. Go out there and try and be a better version of yourself. And tell me if you're not happier. Tell me if you don't feel better about yourself. Tell me if your life isn't more fulfilling. Tell me if you don't have more of the happiness that God actually created you for. What's the problem? Well, it's not that easy. There's obstacles there. Once upon a time, there was a Native American Indian boy. And Indians at the age of 16 used to send a young man out into the wilderness for 30 days. 30 days they had to fend for themselves. They had to find their own food. They had to defend themselves against wild animals. Find places to sleep, all that sort of thing. 30 days. And then after 30 days, all the men in the tribe, they would come, they would search for the young man, they would bring him back, they would initiate him. Okay, this one young man sets off on his journey. Everything's fine for a few days. Plenty of food, no wild animals. Weather's nice. Find somewhere to sleep each night. But around the 5th or the 6th day, he couldn't find any food. Started to get hungry. 6th, 7th day, couldn't find any food. This goes on for a week. Finally, he wakes up in the morning of the 13th day, hasn't eaten for a week. Starving. Looks off into the distance, sees a mountain. Thinks to himself, I'm going to go up on the mountain, make this food on the mountain. I've tried everything else. Heads in the direction of the mountain, middle of the morning, comes to the mountain, starts to climb the mountain. About half an hour later, he discovers a path leading to the top of the mountain. So he starts to follow the path. Walks the path all day long. Late in the afternoon, just as he's stumbling upon the pinnacle of the mountain, still hasn't found any food. A rattlesnake comes across the path in front of him. Boy looks at the snake. Snake looks at the boy. The boy slowly begins to back away from the snake. But as he does, the snake says to the boy, Boy, I'm lost up here in the mountains, and I cannot find my way down. But I know you know the way down the mountain. Please, will you lead me down the mountain? The boy says to the snake, No, I know what you are. You're a rattlesnake. I know what you could do to me. At any moment, you could strike out, bite me, hurt me, even kill me. Snake says to the boy, Boy, you look hungry. The boy says, I'm starving. I haven't eaten in a week. Snake says to the boy, Boy, I know where the food is. You lead me down the mountain, I'll lead you to food. The boy says, No, I know what you are, and I know what you can do to me. Snake said to the boy, Boy, if you lead me down the mountain, I promise you I will not hurt you, and I promise you I'll lead you to food. The boy thought for a moment. Then he said to the snake, Do you promise? The snake said, I do. So the boy led the snake down the mountain, and the snake led the boy to food, every type of food the boy could imagine. The snake laid before the boy a banquet fit for a king. The boy ate, and he drank, and he felt like a king. He ate some more, and he drank some more, and then the snake began to dance. And when the snake danced, it was beautiful. And the boy ate some more, and drank some more, and the snake danced, and the boy danced, and then all of a sudden, the snake struck out and bit the boy. The boy fell to the ground, screaming, crying. Snake flipped over at the boy. The boy looked at the snake looked at the boy. The boy screamed at the snake, You promised! You promised you wouldn't hurt me. The snake looked at the boy and said, You knew what I was when you picked me up. Question. What is it in your life that sooner or later is just going to turn on you and strike you dead? What is it in your life? Because we all encounter rattlesnakes along the way, right? What is it in your life right now that sooner or later is just going to turn on you and strike you down? And what are you doing? We tell ourselves, Oh, we won't get hurt, I'm smarter. Fools we are. Fools we are. Two more things, and we'll ask some questions. You ever seen a movie called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? favorite movie. Not the new one, the old one. You saw the old one? Yeah, you're old enough to have seen the old one. So you got the 5 kids, they win they find the golden tickets, so they win, what do they win? Does anyone remember? Tour of the chocolate factory, and what else? Lifetime supply of chocolate, very good. So they got the golden ticket, they win the tour of the factory, the lifetime supply of chocolate, and each allowed to bring, how many people with them to the factory? One. So Charlie brings who? Grandpa, that's right, Grandpa Joe. So they all show up and they meet the Mr. Wonka, and they all go into the factory, and one by one we get rid of the brats, right? So we just got Charlie, Grandpa Joe, Mr. Wonka left. You remember, we're just in the Wonka living room. It was all white. We just shrank my TV down about this big, and put him in his mum's Louis Vuitton and sent him off with those little people, you know. What are they called? Of the lumps, that's right. Singing that little song all the time. Anyone want to sing the song? No? No takers on the song? Okay, alright, that's the one. So, all of a sudden, Mr. Wonka's mood changes. And he says, I gotta go. I got things to do, and lettuce to ride, phone calls to make, and the door's there, and show yourself out, and I hope you do it to the factory. And he goes inside this door, this enormous office door, the door slams. And Charlie looks up at Grandpa Joe, he says, what happened? Grandpa Joe said, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. He goes charging into the office. Remember, in the office, everything's in half. There's like half a chair, and half a desk, and half a mirror, and half a statue, and half a clock, and half a filing cabinet. And Mr. Wonka's sitting on half a chair, half a desk, writing half a letter with half a pen. And Grandpa Joe walks up behind him, he says, Mr. Wonka. Wonka doesn't say anything, he doesn't even turn around, just ignores him completely. Keeps writing his letter. Grandpa Joe goes right, gets in his face, and says, Mr. Wonka, what about the chocolate? Mr. Wonka says, what chocolate? Grandpa Joe says, you know the lifetime supply of chocolate, because Charlie won the golden ticket, we got the tour of the factory, but when does he get the chocolate? Mr. Wonka says, there is no chocolate. Grandpa Joe said, what do you mean there's no chocolate? Mr. Wonka said, you broke the rules. Grandpa Joe said, I haven't seen your rules. Mr. Wonka says, wrong. He gets up, he goes over to half the filing cabinet, takes out half a photocopy of the contract that gets it signed at the beginning of the movie. Beginning of the tour. Begins to walk through with half a magnifying glass. He turns to Grandpa Joe and he says, you stole fizzy lifting drinks from the fizzy lifting drink room. You floated up in the ceiling, now the ceiling has to be sterilized. You broke the rules, there is no chocolate. Grandpa Joe says, you're a crook, you're a thief, you're a swindler. How could you crush this little boy's dreams? And at that moment you see Charlie's walked into the edge of the room and you can tell that Charlie is devastated. Now remember earlier in the movie, just after Charlie found the golden ticket, he was running down a dark alley. Who did he meet in the dark alley? Anyone remember? Slugworth, that's right. And Slugworth had offered Charlie more money than he could earn in 100 lifetimes if Charlie would bring him one what? One everlasting gobstopper. Mr. Wonka had given each of the kids one everlasting gobstopper during the tour of the factory. Grandpa Joe comes up and he takes Charlie by the arm. He says, if Slugworth wants an everlasting gobstopper, that's just what we're going to give him. He begins to walk Charlie out. After a couple of steps, Charlie stops. Takes Grandpa Joe's hand off his arm, he turns around, he walks back into the office. Mr. Walker's sitting back down on half a chair, half a desk, writing half a letter with half a pen. Takes the everlasting gobstopper from his pocket. He says, Mr. Walker, and he places it on the edge of the desk. Walker doesn't say anything. He doesn't turn around. He doesn't look up. He doesn't look at the everlasting gobstopper. He doesn't have to. He just reaches out his hand across the desk and he grasps the everlasting gobstopper and whispers, so shines a good deed in a weary world. I'll give you the secret of life. Just do the next right thing. I can't tell you what you should do 10 years from now. I can't even tell you what you should do next week. But I can tell you this for absolute certainty. If you do the next right thing, often enough, for long enough, regrets come from when we ignore the inner voice, conscience, that says don't do that. All of life's regrets come from ignoring that inner voice. You're going to come up against moments, big and small, in your life. You're going to know exactly what the right thing is to do. It's none of this rubbish about, oh, I didn't really know if that was the right thing, if it wasn't the right thing. No. Take a couple of minutes in the classroom to start to develop a little bit of clarity and a little bit of courage, and you will discover that in 99.99999% of cases, you know exactly what the right thing to do is. And I can guarantee you that, my friends, is the path to happiness. And the more frequency with which you can choose that path, the happier you'll be in this life and in the next. Last thing. You're young. The world needs changing. Even the most casual observer comes to that conclusion. I don't meet a single person on the planet who says, well, it's in great shape, isn't it? I mean, it's just moving along just fabulously. Let's just keep moving it in the direction it's going. It's moving in such a fabulous direction. Let's just not mess with it, right? No. There's not a single idiot on the planet who believes that. You know, every person on the planet comes to the conclusion the world needs changing. What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about that? Are you going to live a solitary, selfish, single, self-absorbed life? Can you get out there and do something? God has given you a lot of abilities as a human being. A lot of fabulous abilities. Two in particular, worthy of note. One, the ability to choose. I'll do this, I won't do that. Free will gets a lot of talk, gets a lot of airtime. The second ability that God has given you gets almost no airtime. The ability to dream. God has created you uniquely with an ability to dream. You have the ability to look into the future, imagine something bigger and better in the future, and then come back into the present and work in the present to make that future reality. It's an extraordinary ability. Most people in modern culture have stopped dreaming. Gotten so caught up in the day-to-day drudgery of life, they just stop dreaming, they just set their dreams aside. Take some time to dream. At this time in your life, in every time in your life, but at this time in your life in particular. Most people don't. They just stop dreaming at some point. They just sort of get into a rut. And they just stay in that rut. And they realize they can't get out of the rut. Because they've made all these life choices and life decisions and they have all these obligations that go along with it. And then they feel stuck and they feel trapped. And that's what creates the quiet desperation that Thoreau talked about. Don't let that happen to you. Take some time to dream. Most people only have two real excuses in life. They spend the first half of their life saying, I'm too young for that stuff. And the second half of their life saying, I'm too old for that stuff. Don't let those be your excuses. Tiger Woods was 3 years old when he first broke 50 for 9 holes of golf. Mozart was 8 years old when he wrote his first symphony. Charles Dickens, 12 years old when he quit school to work in a factory, pasting labels on shoe polish. Why? His father had been in prison because he couldn't pay his debts. Dickens needed money to get his father out of jail. 12 years old, still managed to become one of the greatest authors in history. Anne Frank, 13 years old when she began her diary. Ralph Waldo Emerson, 14 years old when he enrolled at Harvard. Paul McCartney was 15 years old when John Lennon invited him to join a band. Bill Gates was 19 years old when he co-founded Microsoft. Joe DiMaggio was 26 years old when he hit safely for 56 consecutive games without steroids. I have to point that out these days, you know, because, well, you know, he didn't need steroids. He had Marilyn Monroe. William Shakespeare was 31 years old when he wrote Romeo and Juliet. Thomas Jefferson was 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Think on that. Thomas Jefferson was 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Is our culture still producing 33-year-olds that could write the Declaration of Independence today? Is our culture still producing that kind of person? This culture that is more interested in defending the right of self-expression than it is in producing cells that are actually worth expressing. Mother Teresa, 40 years old when she began her work in Calcutta. Important word, began. Why is it important? Because we do get caught up in our own little worlds from time to time, don't we? When we do, there's the tendency to think, oh yeah, Mother Teresa, right? She spent her whole life down there in Calcutta taking care of those poor people, right? Wrong. 40 years old, she started a new life. 40 years old, she dreamt a new dream. 40 years old, she stepped into the classroom of silence, sat down with her God and said, God, things are a mess down here. How can I help? And in the next 20 years, she captured the imagination of the whole world with less money than any single person in this room. With less contacts than any single person in this room. She captured the imagination of the whole world. I don't sound too old. I don't sound too young. Pablo Picasso, 55 years old, when he painted Guernica and revolutionized the arts. Don Perignon was 60 years old when he produced the first glass of champagne. Oscar Hammerstein was 64 years old when he wrote The Sound of Music. Winston Churchill was 65 years old when he became Britain's Prime Minister. Victor fight with Hitler, because everyone knew it needed to be done, but nobody had the courage to do it. Michelangelo, 71 years old when he designed the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, 24 years old when he carved the Pieta. Benjamin Franklin was 79 years old when he invented bifocals. Frank Lloyd Wright was 91 years old when he finished his work on the Guggenheim Museum. Dimitri Hernandez was 98 years old when he ran a marathon. Yeah, Dimitri Hernandez was 98 years old when he ran the Athens Marathon. And Arichi Rai was 100 years old when he climbed Mount Fuji. That do not sound too old. And do not sound too young. Now is your time. When is your time?
Now.
God bless you. It's great to be with you.